Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the eAA's online proctoring seminar. Very pleased to have you here, and we're all very excited to be presenting this to you. We have some great speakers lined up from across the world who are going to be giving us their view and opinion and experience of online proctoring, and we hope that you're going to find that really interesting, satisfying. I'd like to give a shout out before we start to Gareth Hopkins, who's part of the team here, who's steering us through the StreamYard presentation. And thanks very much for that, Gareth. And those of you who know me will know that I'm Graham Hudson. I'm chair of the Year Assessment Association presently. And if you don't, then I'm chair of the Assessment Association still. So very, very good to see you on the call. So a few bits to introduce ourselves. If you're not familiar with the eAA, we are a not-for-profit membership organisation. We're largely supported and run by volunteers. We provide professional support and facilitate debate and discussion within the industry. We create and communicate positive contributions about the technology that we use and that you're using. And we look to develop statements and standards of good practice. And as you'll see there, we have now over 3,000 members from pretty much every continent and a great array of countries around the world. If you want to follow us, then there's the details of our website. We have a Twitter account at eAssess, a LinkedIn page and discussion group. And on any of those channels, you'll find information about us, case studies, articles, newsletters, anything that you feel can be of use and interest to you as you develop your journey with e-assessment and technology, and as we seek to promote it nationally and internationally. So here's our agenda for today. Once I've finished welcoming you, we're going to have the first session, which is about AI in online proctoring. We're going to take a short break, just 5 minutes, and then move to the next session, what happens next, another short break, and then we've got a very interesting session on online proctoring in the medical context. Now, the breaks are really intended to enable people who wish to dip in and out to do so without losing continuity. They'll only be 5 minutes, so don't sort of go off and start doing anything involved if you want to start staying with us throughout the whole presentation. And I'd like to give a shout out now to our event sponsors, and thank you very much to them for supporting us and providing the sponsorship to DigiExam. Thank you very much, Eintech, and to TestReach. We're most grateful for the support that you give us in many, many ways, and we seek through things like this to give back to you and to our general audience. Now, if you're not aware, we have our international conference coming up 6th and 7th of June in the Tower Hotel, London. Those of you who came to it last year will know what a great event it was, what a superb venue it is, fantastic views of Tower Bridge and across the Thames. And we're getting well on the way to getting our agenda and program sorted out. It will be the occasion where we announce the winners of our awards. We're just going into the whole judging process now, so that's really very exciting. And the number of entries has been really fantastic and across all continents of the world. So if you've not got that in your diary, get it in your diary. Tickets are up for sale at early bird rates. Please do go and check out our website for that. And alongside that, call for presentations. We've extended this by a week so that we could raise this and mention it to you on this call now. So if you have a piece of work or a project or an area of interest or research that you think would be of interest to the whole of our audience, then please go and fill in the call for presentations. If you want to find out more, then just email conference@eassessment.com. and we'll be pleased to help you there. So today we have our panel chairs taking us through the sessions. Romano Moss, who is Director of Education at the Royal College of Emergency Medicine, and who hosted a seminar for us yesterday with awarding organisations. I hear from those who went, it was a great day. Paul Muir, who's Chief Strategy and Partnership Officer at Surpass Assessment. He's the eAA's Vice Chair. And Patrick Coates, Chief Revenue Officer at Sediverse, board member of the eAA and long-time member and supporter. And each of those is going to be hosting and taking each of the panel sessions today. So thank you very much to them. And we look forward to hearing from each of them with their panels as well. So without more ado, the first session that we've got is AI in online proctoring, and I'll introduce you to the panel members, and then Patrick will magically appear on the screen here and take over from me.
Thank you very much, Graham. That was fantastic. What we're going to talk about now is obviously AI and online proctoring. It sounds very, very obvious. What we're focusing on, though, is the AI that's being used for the actual cheat detection component. In other words, monitoring the sessions and how AI is being used to support that. What we're not doing in this session, we probably won't do it for later one, is how AI might be used for ID validation or something like that, which is a very, very different area. So we're very much focusing on the part that actually happens within the sessions. So if we just move on to the next slide, please. So what I'm going to introduce you now, we've got a range of people from within the industry. We didn't actually, we opened this up to anyone that was, whether they were sponsor of the eAA or not. One thing that we want to do as an organization is to make sure that as many people as possible have a voice to explain about what they're doing, what their perspective is around online proctoring in the case of this special interest group. I think we're going to win the award for the most international audience. We've got Pele, Noor, Adash and Thomas. So we've got Sweden, Germany, India, and then USA via Afghanistan, and I'm in Yorkshire. So every country around the world is represented. We're getting to that situation that we're going to be well represented and give a diverse range of opinions. So what I'm going to do in the first instance, because you might not know much about these organizations, obviously I'm in the benefit that I get to speak to these people all the time. What we're going to do is just give 2 or 3 minutes for each person, just to give a little bit about their organization, they're involving in AI in terms of online proctoring, how long they've been doing it for, etc. And then what we'll do after that 2 or 3 minutes introduction, I've got some questions that I'm going to ask to each member just to draw a little bit more information out. What I would say, if you do have any questions that you want to ask, please just put them in the comments. And what I'll do is I'll act as moderator and I'll ask those. So I'll go in the order that they're on my screen. So Pele, could I go over to you first, please, around a little bit about your work with DigiExam?
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. I'm Pelle Englund, part of the customer success team at DigiExam. And DigiExam is a provider of an e-exams platform. So basically, we help schools and educational institutions to digitalize the exam process. Before the pandemic, almost 99% of all our exams were in the exam halls. But as the pandemic hit, a lot of organizations and institutions turned to a different strategy. So as an additional part of DigiExam, as the examinations platform, we also provide an additional feature, which is the remote proctoring tool. So it's an add-on to the existing platform, which provides a lockdown environment and the ability to create exams, deliver them, and also grade and mark and publish students' results.
Okay, Noor, over to you. Actually, I should just say, by the way, the company that I work for, we work with Noor. So I'll just a bit of a disclaimer, just so you realise that. But over to Noor now. Over to you.
Thank you, Patrick. My name is Noor Akwari. I am the co-founder and CEO of Rosalind. Rosalind is a proctoring technology company. We have built a purpose-built AI technology over the last 3 years. To be able to deliver exams at scale, deliver great student experience, and make sure that proctoring is accessible, equitable. So we have built a technology around that. My personal background, I am originally from Afghanistan. I was working. I was a political advisor before coming to the United States to U.S. military, and then immigrated to the United States in 2007. And since then, have been an entrepreneur. This is my third company. So, thank you, Patrick.
Okay, Adarsh, over to you.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Adarsh Sudhendra. I represent an organization called ExcelSoft. ExcelSoft is a learning and assessments company. We have a global reach. We have products and solutions in the online assessment space and the remote proctoring space. So we work with organizations, universities, institutions, government bodies across the world, helping them deliver smart, secure assessments with remote proctoring. Saras is our flagship product. Many of you may have heard about it. So we deliver over 100 million assessments on our platform for our customers across the globe. Easy Proctor is the latest entry into our product suite. Now it was always there, but the pandemic made it, put the limelight on it, and it's a smart AI-enabled remote proctoring platform. So I personally, I'm an engineer at heart, turned into a product guy. I love the education space, the assessment space, and most recently the online remote proctoring space. I'm a product enthusiast. I work with like minds, contributing to communities. Looking forward to this discussion. Thank you.
And then finally, Thomas.
Yeah, hi there. My name is Thomas. I'm representing Proctorio. I think the name itself is speaking. We're in proctoring. We're on top of assessment or learning management solutions, really focused on proctoring using AI since the beginning. I think we will talk about it a little later, just what my role in that game is. I started in Proctorio 2019 with the foundation of the Proctorio GmbH located in Germany. So we operate like international business out of Germany these days, and make sure that like all countries have the possibility to do like assessments in a very accessible, convenient, but also secure mode. I think that is what drives all of us, like all our companies. We heard that before, that this proctoring gives a lot of opportunities. To my opinion and also my experiences, we definitely need to have a look into the legal and compliance side of things. Talking about it, we're handling a lot of sensitive data here, which definitely need to be focused on a little bit. But I think we all do. Hopefully we do. And yeah, that's basically it.
Okay, now we've got a range of organizations here, from the more established Proctorio, been using AI for a while. I think DigiExam driven more by the pandemic. I mean, Noor, you're much newer to this. In terms of your decision to use AI, I'll start off with you, Thomas, because we finished with you. I mean, what was the big driver? I know you've talked about some of the things that were involved. Was it, is it as simple as cost savings? Was it, we think it's better than having people because people have inherent, bias, they get tired, etc. Was there one thing that was, I know you're comparatively new to the organization, what was the big driver, do you think?
Yeah, that's a very good question. But I think what drives AI, or what brings in the need of AI, is simply scalability. So I think if you talk about this this proctoring or invigilation topic, which is like hundreds of years old. If you go to exam center, whatever, we have seen that. You can have like surveillance, take it like this, of a whole lot of people in a room. You can do a lot of things which you can't do if they are like remote proctored at home. So AI, to my opinion, is really that scalability thing. But just imagine you would have like thousands of students starting an exam the same time, 9 o'clock Monday morning, and the exam is meant to be like a 4 hours duration, whatever. You can just calculate it with simple mathematics that you would never be able, or you would need a whole lot of people to really review these records, which is the original version of it, maybe review and record. And that simply is what AI can do for you. Really focus, put the things as they are, focus on suspicious behavior, and let machines like help you doing that job.
So no, you're the other end of the spectrum, the fact comparatively new to the, I mean, why did you decide to get involved in online proctoring? I mean, there's a million one things you can do AI. Why the online proctoring? What was the big thing for you?
Yeah, so prior to Rosalind, I had an assessment company, and we were delivering high-stake exams, language exams to the U.S. military, and we were testing people all over the world. And at that time, there was no remote proctoring. We were using Skype to deliver those exams, and it was not scalable. It was not very good. I mean, and very effective either. So I decided to build a little tool to automate this process for our customers, and that tool evolved to what's now Rosalind. And really, so when I built that tool for our internal customers, I knew that there's a huge opportunity for online education to bring value, and that because I'm coming from Afghanistan, I could see the potential of online learning changing the world and providing lots of opportunity to people who don't have it. So I was a big believer in online education, and I looked at it and I said, okay, assessment is a key pillar to learning, and how do you ensure assessments are done in a way that's safeguarded? And so that was kind of my passion about proctoring, and began thinking about AI. And really the vision was, how do we deliver every exam on the internet? How do you deliver it in places with low bandwidth internet? How do we deliver it at scale? And how do we make sure we stay ahead of the game in terms of cheat detection and new tactics and whatnot? And so AI was a natural it was a natural solution to tap into, and we decided to build a purpose-built AI because our vision was to not only make it scalable but also make it accessible and equitable, and very, very effective at exam fraud prevention.
Okay, so thank you for that. So in my mind, and I had the benefit of having spoken to you all beforehand, so I do know what you do and how you do it. But in my mind, I think there might be some slight variance, but you've got probably two models. You've got the live, as in you've got AI being used, monitoring a candidate as they are taking the exam, where the AI is flagging up any suspicious behaviors. I'm sure there's lots. We can talk a bit about that later on, different behaviors, whatever might be happening about head movements, eye movement, keystrokes, etc. So you've got that live one, but then I think it was with you, Pele, was saying about, because a lot of the work that you use academic, where, and I must confess, I didn't really know this until I spoke to you, because I wasn't as well informed as I thought I was, but you're actually using the AI with recorded sessions. So what you're doing is you're using the AI retrospectively. So I think it works where everyone's taking the same exam at the same time. Is there anything different, significantly different about that? Is it, dare I say, easier, or is it the same challenge because you actually got huge volumes of people still having to process very quickly?
Was that for me, Patrick?
Thank you, Hello, sorry, yeah.
I mean, and just back to the original question, I think that the need for AI came from a customer need. And when we, all our existing customers that suddenly needed to shift from maybe an on-campus way of delivering high-stake exams to a flexible way of allowing students to either take the exam on campus or from the comfort of their home. So that was the basic need that we wanted to satisfy to all our existing customers, but also to all new ones. And I think maybe one of the most challenging things was for new customers to adopt from maybe an analog scenario of conducting assessments or exams to a digital one, and in the midst of a pandemic as well, with all the additional layers. But it all came down also to the flexibility. Some organizations or institutions, they wanna or need to record depending on their scenario. Some institutions might not be by law allowed to record. So that's also was key in our solution, was the possibility for an institution to decide which parts of the proctoring tool will we use. And depending on regional legislation, depending on what the strategy was for the customer, they can themselves choose to use the specific functions or features as they will. So it's not a one solution fits all. It's intended to be used for that specific case that they have.
So if you're recording, thousands of students in a session, I mean, it could be tens of thousands of students. I mean, how long does it take you typically to then run? Is it instantaneous almost to run through the AI and then it just flags it up and someone looks at it? Is it as simple as that?
Yeah, it basically gives you a summarized or credibility report at the end. Obviously, depending on the case, there might be that you only take a look at 10% of the students of the cohort, or you'll go deep dive into the ones with the lowest rate or score. But also one key feature as well is to, because things happen at home. I have a dog right next to me. I'm a bit afraid that he will bark, and that would definitely cause some disruption. But during an exam, yeah, that's not a really bad thing. Obviously, if there were voices or something, so the recordings, they do flag, or in the recordings there are the automated events that are flagged, which caused or created the credibility report. And if needed, you can also download shorter snippets of time. And in our scenario, in case you need to prove that a student did something extraordinary or not allowed, it's a good way to have that recording. But we also have a lot of customers that they can't record because they're not allowed to, and they will only use live invigilation or live proctoring. So, but it's fairly easy, and depending on how fast you want to access that the video recording, it's as soon as the student has handed in. So you could directly go to review the student.
So I'll ask you, Adarsh, because that initial question, but I'm particularly interested because I know you do, the volume of exams that you do is just absolutely huge, to be quite frank, mind-blowing. But back to that original question around the drivers, it must be purely about scalability, or other things as well?
Yes. So generally, remote proctoring and AI in remote proctoring solves two very important problems for large organizations. And Thomas mentioned both of them. The first problem is cost, right? So if you're a large university, a large organization, and you're delivering hundreds of thousands of exams, right? So using human proctors, your costs would shoot up very quickly, right? So the second problem is the problem of scale. So you already have the problem of cost, but finding proctors who are trained, potentially certified to match your scale is next to impossible, right? So you end up working with these large proctoring companies who are sitting on large pool of human proctors who make use of the situation and bump up the price. So the two are interconnected. So two problems: the problem of cost, the problem of scale. So AI doesn't necessarily solve these two problems; it eliminates them, right? So it's not solving these two problems; it's eliminating them by bringing in scale and a low cost alternative, but you'll have to compromise with the quality and the security levels there, right? So there are quite a few AI solutions out there in the market. So if you see a spectrum of the AI solutions, on one end of the spectrum you have solutions that are very basic in nature, that do some very basic face recognition and claim to be an AI enabled remote proctoring solution. And on the other end of the spectrum, you have these ambitious solutions that claim to be capable of doing fully automated remote proctoring sessions all by themselves without any human intervention. Somewhere in the middle is that sweet spot where AI today is actually making sense. It's actually adding value, right? So AI today is not at this extreme or not that extreme, but somewhere in the middle. It adds value by helping proctors identify possible cheating scenarios by flagging potential cheating scenarios in a recorded video, enabling the proctor to review it and withhold the scores. So if you ask where we are with AI and why it is being used today, and how useful it is today, it's that sweet spot in the middle that is actually making AI work in the world of remote proctoring.
Yeah, I mean, I must admit, I've got some questions in a minute, but I just want to pick up on that point because, Thomas, I know Proctorio have been, I believe that you've only ever used AI, haven't you, in your proctoring solution? I think from the beginning of you always used AI, was it?
Yeah, we started with AI. So the one thing you excluded is, of course, at the beginning of the course, that we need to make sure there's actually the right person in front of the screen, something to compare, whatever. And the second one is during the exam, exactly what, like my colleague said, is during the exam, really have the possibility to flag suspicious behavior. Of course, you need to define suspicious behavior. And of course, this is true. I think others just pointed it out. That there might be some kind of compromise in terms of quality security, since you have the possibility to afterwards go into what we would say review center to really make sure went everything well, who are the most suspicious ones. I think that is most powerful actually, if you have the possibility to create such evidence. And we talk about evidence in that case. So, and I think just coming back to the live proctoring part of it. So, of course, you can do live proctoring. You've seen live proctoring all time. I believe if you do the one or the other, the problem is you don't have evidence. You can just go and catch somebody in the act, say it like this. But if you don't do, it's just gone, right? It's like a on-campus situation. You will just figure out somebody cheated or not. If somebody has been lucky enough not to got caught, that's great. If not, but the same time applies to like a home situation, right? It's just a different environment. We just need to make sure, hey, make sure that all technical auxiliaries we have are used. We can capture all this, and afterwards have the possibility to properly work with the data based on AI flagging, which just helps us to reduce cost, which is true, scale, and also make it convenient, because it's the second thing. If you talk about live proctoring, how would you make it convenient? We've seen, especially like in service exams, or like professional awarding bodies, whatever, people like who work every day. It's so hard to manage time between family, between job, between like the needed certification, whatever is to be done. Just this time management and the convenience that comes with the flexibility to just be able to do it on a Saturday or Sunday. Try to find people at scale in a live proctor environment on Saturdays and Sundays, for example. And we've seen a lot of exams like shifting from standard weekdays to the weekends in order to manage like time between job, family, and education.
I mean, we should, as well as scalability and cost, we should have mentioned convenience, because if it makes it easier for someone to be able to take an exam when they want to take an exam more on demand. Now, I appreciate that's not always possible in an academic context because you're having particular exam dates. We've got a question here from Samir. Up to what percentage can we trust AI, especially in terms of exam? Oh, there we are. Fantastic. The technology's done it for me. Now, in all honesty, I think we've probably just answered this to a degree in terms of what we're talking about by saying that it's, you've got two ends, no AI and everything to do with AI, and it's probably somewhere in the middle, no matter what you do. I think that's partly to do with the comfort factor of people are always a little bit cynical about technology. And there's a lot of hype at the moment about ChatGPT, and I've been, people I work with have been looking into it, and I gave my son a link and said, go and try this out. And he actually said it works really, really well in some cases, but in others, it doesn't. And it's those exceptions, those outliers, those variations that you can't sort of mitigate for. You've got to be able to have some sort of human intervention, I think. At the moment, I'm not saying that's going to apply in years to come, but I think probably it is at the moment. I did actually a little bit of research. It was only sort of a little sort of survey. I was going to present it on this, but I'm going to save it for another session. But we've had around a dozen organisations responding, and of those 12 organisations, 11 are using what I would call AI augmented, online proctoring, i.e. they're not just 100%. It's basically there's an individual that's making a decision about whether that person if there's been something going on. So I think it's widely being used. I think that's probably key from this session. It's been around for a very long time. I think it's just because it's become so ubiquitous, the term AI, everyone uses it as being the solution to every problem. People are a bit nervous, but that's certainly not the case. I mean, we've probably been between all of the people on this call and other people, there's probably millions of exams that are delivered here via AI facilitated proctoring. The other thing I would say is I speak to people every day about this in one of my day jobs, etc. And the people I speak to, they don't have an issue at all with AI. They're not saying it's a problem for them in the context of what we're talking about here. Of course, don't forget that who's to say that proctoring in a live exam environment is the right way of doing anyway. It's just the way we have done it. It doesn't mean it's the best way or it's a perfect way. And I know there's situations where when people have got test centers, there's, bribery going on, corruption, people say. So having physical people there proctoring is not necessarily the best solution either. It's just the one that we're most comfortable with. Does anyone want to add to that? Sorry, I went on a bit there. It's meant to be about you. Anyone to add to that?
No, I mean, sorry. Yeah, so I was just saying that now, just this last year, we delivered close to 200,000 remotely proctored exams. And I would say more than 50% of it was record and review, right? So, the test session itself would be recorded and made available with the evidence to a proctor with the AI flagging and all that. And then about 25 to 30% of it was augmented proctoring, where the AI engine in real time, flags, and alerts with visual indicators to the live proctor, so that the live proctor can jump in and take an action. Now, very, very few of our exams, have to do with completely, remote proctor, automated proctored exams, because, frankly, we have been working on this product for over 8 years, and we put in our heart and soul into this. We also follow the best products and solutions out there in the industry. A fully automated, AI-based proctoring, while many solutions out there claim that it is a reality today. It is a reality only in a controlled environment, right? It works well in a lab or for a very specific use case. The real world is very different, right? In the real world, you have problems with the internet, you have lighting issues, you have issues with the camera. There may be a party going on in the neighborhood. All those interfere and break your AI model. No matter how much good you claim your AI model to be, there will always be these real world events that will break your AI model, making it a big failure. So today, what is realistic with the technologies, what we have today is record and review with AI flagging and augmented proctoring with AI assisting the live proctoring.
I can maybe add to that. So Ardash, I want to support that point, because this real life is, if it's a party or if it's a ADHD person like flipping around in front of the screen, whatever, it's like all this stuff that happens every day. And it's not talking about the majority, but the minority. And that's exactly why we are in that discussion, since it's really a few people mostly, hopefully, that run into situations when the AI breaks, because it's just like mathematics and algorithm. You need to train them very well. And even if you do, there might occur events which you haven't thought of, or you didn't train, whatever, you cannot train, or it's so diametrically in two directions that you will never be able to train. So to my opinion, it's not talking about trust, to refer to the question we've just seen. It's not the trust that will still bring the need for people to review. It's more the real life events to make sure everything went well, and everybody, really everybody, not only the majority of people, but everyone will be treated equally, which is a very, very fundamental right of students.
We've got some more questions coming in. So the next one from Martin, I'm going to place to you, Noor. So again, obviously, we were talking in an academic context about online proctoring in terms of recording sessions and then checking them afterwards. Of course, one of the big points of proctoring is not just stopping cheating, it's preventing come from. I think item leakage is the sort of the polite term for it, but your exams, you know, items being taken, put on the internet, etc. I know, Noor, that you've you developed that live proctoring, i.e. AI facilitated live. Do you want to just talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So before answering that particular question, I want to just make something clear. So there are two ways of, there are two AI proctoring services or solutions. One is, purpose built from the ground up, and based on the right the right vision with of making exams not only scalable but secure, but equitable, right, and low cost. So there's that purpose built AI that requires a lot of deep engineering to make it work. Then there is the AWS recognition, which is general purpose AI. It's really built for security, surveillance, other types of things, and you try to integrate that so that you can automate professional services and make it scalable, but you really have to accept or compromise the security on it. For us, it was different. It was challenge that we set up for ourselves was, how do we make exams more proctoring more effective than human, more scalable than human, more cost effective than human, and a better experience for the students. And we approach it from that perspective. And so we decided to make sure that the AI analysis has to be real time. So we built models specifically for detection in real time, because we believe AI is better at and more consistent at detection. But we don't let AI make the decision. So the human is always in the loop. So the AI detects something, escalates it to a human confirms it. If it is something that is a violation, then the human is the one that engages the student to deter and to stop. So this human AI collaboration in real time really works. It's effective because it deters the majority of the violations, but it's also scalable. It's 24/7. There's no scheduling required. You can deliver millions of exams with it, and because the human is making the decision and engages the student experience is also amazing. So Rosalind, that's what we have been focused on, and we have delivered great results with our technology. To answer the specific question, it has got to be real time. For record and review, there's no deterrence effect. You cannot stop content theft in a record and review situation. It has got to be live. For us, it's real time. As soon as we detect an activity that's related to content theft, the human engages, stops, pauses, sends alerts, warnings, that sort of thing.
Fantastic. We've got some more questions. So I'll just stop you there, because one thing I was going to say is, and I think this probably applies to one of the other questions as well, about sacrificing quality and security. And there's also one about risk here as well. The point is it's up to you as the organization implementing the proctoring solution and the use of the AI, what's appropriate for your particular exam. So in an academic context, record and review works because everyone's taking the same exam at the same time. The question's out in the public domain for past papers anyway, so there's no incentive to try and protect that. I also know in other countries that I've worked as well, in the Middle East, where it's the law that you have to publish every exam after someone's taken it anyway. So in those contexts, it's not a concern about content going missing. So I think it's got to be appropriate. Now, I had to Google this term because someone mentioned one of the terms about effect recognition, which I didn't know what it meant. So I was just Googling it. But I'm just going to put this over to Adarsh, because one of the things that we were speaking about when we spoke earlier on this week was about the it's not just one thing. It's not just about the movement or your eye movement or your head or noise in the background, but it's different criteria that are, keystrokes and everything else. Could you just very quickly, Adarsh, just because I think you explained it quite well to me about the different data points. And I know people got slight variations, but it is from different data points.
Yeah. So if you look at the solutions out there that we have, in the market today, the most popular solutions, most of them focus on one data input, right? Which is the video feed that you receive from the test taker's camera, right? There's face recognition, there's object recognition. Now, and then also there's the microphone listening to what's happening in the room. There's the voice recognition, but it's primarily related to the video feed. So the video has both the image as well as the sound. But we see, in a very high stake exam, we saw that the candidate is perfectly facing the screen, and he's not moving out. The room is silent, but we could clearly make out that his facial expressions are not matching with what's happening on the screen, because there's also the screen that we had streamed up to the cloud. Clearly, there was somebody who was controlling the machine and taking the exam on behalf of the candidate. So relying on just the video feed is never a good idea. So there has to be AI models that take multiple things into consideration: the keystroke, the speed at which the candidate is answering the question, the sound in the room, right, and the pose the candidate is having. A secondary camera, that's a very popular addition to the remote proctoring world, where there's a secondary camera that you can have in the room that will give you a different view of what's happening. So earlier I could hide a book under the table, and the camera would never capture it. But with the secondary camera, that is ruled out. You have a complete view, an isometric view of the candidate. So the model has to use these multiple data points and get better at detecting potential malpractice, rather than depending on one or a handful of data points.
That's good. We've got a few more minutes left, so I'm just going to. There's quite a few questions here, and I think I'm going to summarize some of them, because I think that last point from you, Ardesh, was quite the key for me. One, you've got to use different data points, different things, and it's not one size fits all, because we've got many countries represented here with different technicians, different people, different perspectives, different cultures, looking at things in different ways, which is only a good thing, because of course you have different perspectives on things. It changes in how you interpret things, how you do things, but it can only be good. It creates variance. Of the remote proctoring companies that I've spoken to that do AI, they're all very different. There are some organizations, and one of the questions was about 100% AI. You can do it if you want to. If you're happy that it's appropriate for that particular exam, and maybe it's enough to be a deterrent, maybe the fact that someone is being watched is fine. Maybe you don't care about that. It's entirely up to the person that owns the exam. I mean, Adarsh mentioned about having dual cameras. Well, that might work in some context, but actually in a corporate environment, it might not work, because people are taking the exams in the office, and having multiple cameras, etc., might not be appropriate. So I think it is very important to have something that is flexible enough so that you can change the sensitivity, so it's appropriate to the environment, but it's got that flexibility so that if people do have different needs, as we mentioned about people with ADHD, etc., you've got to be able to compensate for that, so that it's not giving these false positives saying that someone's doing something suspicious when it's not, based on their behavior. That's what's acceptable. And I think the other thing is being able to change that so that it's not one size fits all. So if I'm taking a clinical exam, we're talking a little bit about that later on, people's lives are at stake. So it's very, very important to be able to make sure that things are very, very secure. Whereas, in the middle, we've got the certification exams and academic exams, still important, and you still want that security and credibility, but it doesn't have to be totally sort of too strict. And then the other end of the spectrum, you've got things where perhaps it's minimal, low touch. I speak to people who say, we don't want to do proctored exams. We're happy with the secure browser, so it's fine, it's appropriate. And maybe that's in the lower stake, more compliance type exams, where they're happy for people to do that depending on the level it's at. So I sort of summarized there, because we are running out of time. So we've got a minute left. So I think it's fantastic. We're hopefully going to do these on a frequent basis. I've got the people here. Thank you so much for Pele, Noor, Adarsh, and Thomas for coming on. Like I said, it's the first time we've run one of these sessions, but I'm hoping that we'll be able to do these in the future as well. So if you've got any more questions, by the way, to people, please feel free. Send your questions in, and what we can do, we can submit those, share those with the panel, and we can get people to reply back, and we'll share that to everybody afterwards. So on that note, thank you very much, and hopefully we'll see you all again soon on another session. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, welcome back, everybody, for the second session this afternoon. Wasn't the first one a great one? Some absolutely fantastic discussion there. I'm so sorry that we couldn't get through all the questions. I was absolutely amazed at how many of you are engaging there. And as Pat said, we'll look to get the answers for you and either get folk to write to you directly, or we'll write a blog or something of that sort to get the information back to you. So that's terrific. So I'm going to introduce now the next session, which is online proctoring, what happens next. And Paul Muir, who's Vice Chair of the eAA, is just going to join me for half a second. Hello, Paul. How are things with you?
Hi, Graham. Afternoon. How are you doing? I'm good.
Good. Thanks very much. So I'll hand over to you to introduce your panel and take us through the next session. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Graham, and welcome, everyone. I've got a brilliant panel today. Thrilled to be able to welcome Ashley Norris, Rachel Schoenig, and Sanjo Jose. I'll let them introduce themselves. They'll do it much better than I will in a second. But I think following the AI session, we're here to talk about what the future of what online proctoring might look like. So what happens next? And I think for us, it's great because we have the opportunity to do the sort of crystal ball gazing. And at the moment, no one can prove us wrong. So in 5 years, come back and tell us we're all wrong. But for now, hopefully no one can do that. So I'll pass over to Ashley, then Rachel, then Sanjo to introduce yourself. We'll kick off with this presentation.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Ashley Norris. I'm our SVP of Strategic Growth Initiatives at Measure Learning. And I'll go ahead and just tell you a little bit about Measure. Measure is a full service end-to-end solution, assessment solution. So we do everything from psychometrics to test center to online proctoring. For the purposes of this discussion, many of you may be familiar with ProctorU, and that's our online proctoring solution that's under the Measure umbrella. So excited to be here and see you all. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. Rachel Schoenig. I am CEO of Cornerstone Strategies. I also have the privilege of serving as Chief Science Officer for one of our clients, which is Examity. I spend a lot of time thinking about strategy, thinking about where the industry is headed and what we can do to improve our offerings to test takers, to employers, to score users, whether that's in the educational or workforce setting. Examity is one of the leading online proctoring providers. That's what they focus on, is online proctoring. So between the work that we do for other clients, I come from the testing space. I was head of exam security at ACT, to now the work that we do thinking about strategy, thinking about security, thinking about privacy, and the work that we do with Examity. I've spent a lot of time thinking about where's online proctoring headed and how is it going to help us. So I'm excited to have this conversation.
Hey all, I'm Sanjo, one of the co-founders and also the CEO of Talview. Talview is an AI-enabled end-to-end talent measurement platform where we provide two main solutions. One is our AI interviewing solution, which helps organizations to conduct and authenticate interviews online with a lot of AI-driven automation. And for this conversation, we also have an AI-enabled exam solution where we enable organizations to deliver exams, especially enabled with online proctoring. And a lot of the work which we have been doing at Talview is focused on how we can use software assistance for improving the efficiency and effectiveness of proctoring and online proctoring. And very excited to talk more about that today during the conversation.
Thanks all. And I think our first question we'll talk about is, I think, as I said at the beginning, we're looking at this from a perspective of what's going to happen next. And I think we all recognise, and we're seeing COVID, we saw a huge uplift in online proctoring, and people rushed to it, and everyone obviously saw the impact of that. And I think now we've sort of come out the other side. Now people are saying, well, what happens next? Does it stick around? How's it going to evolve? And so I think sort of our first question is thinking about sort of what do you see from your perspectives in the industry of what are the next sort of technology advancements within online proctoring or remote proctoring, depending on what you want to call it, in the coming years, and how will they maybe impact the industry as a whole? What are we going to see in this space in the next few years? I know that's a very big question to ask in 45 minutes, but that's where we'll start anyway.
Who would you like to start, Paul? I'm sorry.
Rachel, I'll start with you. Sorry.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, so I think, we're seeing such a change, not only in online proctoring, but in testing, that I think there's some really exciting things that we can expect to happen. So one thing I think we can expect to happen is that we're going to move away from the laptop and the desktop as being the sole technology that we're using. I think we're going to see more dual camera. I know Examity has that on its roadmap, so more dual camera usage. I also think we can expect to see more wearables. So whether that's, kind of an augmented reality, virtual reality, I think we can expect to see people, either using headsets or using other kind of visual hardware that will allow them to engage differently with some of the testing content. I also think even smartwatches or other wearables that track kind of how we are interacting with technology or what our movements are, I think are also likely to be incorporated as we continue to see kind of the ecosystem itself around engaging virtually. And that, that's learning, that's workforce, that's assessment, right? Part of the reason we're seeing this growth is because we've had to, going through the pandemic, learn how to interact with each other remotely. And that has certainly helped impact what's happening with online proctoring. I also think the assessments themselves are going to continue to change. So there's definitely been a push around, give me an assessment that's more real. And so I think we might see more performance-based assessments coming on the market, more on-the-job assessments where people are in their job and they're ready to demonstrate their capabilities. And I think from that perspective, it's going to mean that we do need to have more portable tools to be able to assess people, where it's not just tied to a desk and your desktop or laptop camera. And then the last thing I'll say is I think we're going to see more language translation tools being incorporated so that communication itself doesn't require people to have the same native language speaking skills. And we're going to see, I think, especially when it comes to our ability to leverage AI and things like that, I think we're going to see some communication hurdles that we have right now. I think we're going to see those smooth out with some of those tools that are coming onto the market. So that's my guess.
I'll hop in and I'll second Rachel on technologies and remote proctoring that will, I would say, have more visibility to the test taker. And from a security perspective, so there's really, several technologies that have a focus or an outcome, right? Technologies that are focused on increasing security. This session on AI, and I know we have a separate question on AI that we'll get into, but a lot of work in that arena, visibility of the test taker, absolutely second camera, and other technologies that may ensure there's more visibility in the space and different angles and, actual physical, the physical rounding of in time when the test taker's taking the exam, as well as technologies that become more preventative from a security standpoint to implement into a platform to really ensure, security, and on the back end with reporting and doing kind of that post analysis that gets into test development and implementing automation and technology there. The other thing that I would say is something we're seeing a lot is test takers, the high focus becoming on a seamless experience for the test taker, where they not only can maybe decide to have a hybrid modality experience where they may go into a test center, they may go into a remote proctoring solution, but that process is seamless, that they can go back and forth, not only for hybrid modality, but even in a remote proctoring setting where they're engaged, from an assessment standpoint, experiences where they engage with different, I would say, we call them service lines, but essentially different products or different technologies throughout their continuous lifelong learning type of assessment. So, but, they may have some unproctored experiences that are on a platform. They may engage again with a high stakes assessment that may use live proctoring. They may engage again with more of an AI focused automated tool, but really that seamless experience where they feel, where from an assessment standpoint, these become more authentic, they can be practical, but they also are kind of that continuous type of assessment instead of a one-time hit, pass or fail type of assessment. So I think investing in technologies that actually go through that test taker journey and test taker experience will be really important and, are something we're actively working on.
And I think just one thing before I come to you, Sandra, I think one of the things we've seen is, you touched on it, I think both of you touched on it around assessment design maybe. And, assessments, online proctoring for a lot of people was sort of thrust upon them. We talked about, 2-3 years ago. And, was the assessment model designed to think about how is it going to be tested in this way? Is it going to have, and the security perspectives around that? We talk about security set up, post, pre-exam, during exam, and post-exam, that sort of pre-exam design around, is it going to be online proctored? How can it be online proctored? Can you use, to Rachel's point, tablets or other things to do this? So technology plays a part, but it's also going back through that ecosystem as well and looking at where can we, because it's going to impact all of it. And I think we've seen lift and shift so far. I think probably one of the next stages we're probably going to see is that sort of digital by design or online proctored by design, thinking about that more at the beginning. Sanjay, sorry, over to you now.
Yeah, no, I think all three of you covered almost all the key aspects. And from my vantage point, then in the way I look at it, and at Talview, the way we look at a framework of how the space is going to evolve is first around, at the end of the day, technology's primary objective and what drives investment in technology is around cost advantage. So we believe technology is going to significantly bring down the cost of proctoring or exam delivery, and especially proctoring is one of the major components when it comes to cost of exam delivery. So everything around software assisted proctoring or fully automated proctoring, a lot of investments which we are doing, and I'm sure all of us are doing around machine learning to so today the biggest challenge with a fully AI or fully automated proctoring is false positives. Humans can make a lot of judgments around events and determine what's the false positive and what's a real event. And I think a lot of machine learning driven training can help us to take AI or automated proctoring technologies very close to that, or even better than that. At the end of the day, humans also do make a lot of false negatives, or there are a lot of human errors which technology eliminates almost 100%. So I think that's the reducing the cost of exam delivery is going to be a major driver, and a lot of investments in that area. Second is all of you spoke about user experience. So everything from device to ease of starting an exam. I believe as an industry, remote proctoring has not been at the forefront of user experience. We have always had clunky experience because there are too many systems which candidates need to use, and these systems are, and not by choice, but because of the way in which the space has evolved. The integrations are not always seamless, and and then the fact that cost arbitrage often lead to proctoring is always done by somebody who is probably in a different culture, different geography. So there is a strangeness to this and their experience and all of that. I think experience is going to be significantly, and for us to stay relevant and for us to stay, I would say, in line with the experience of test takers, we need to continuously, or we need to reinvent the experience. And a lot of focus which Talview has been putting in is how to take that element of strangeness, how to take that element of invasiveness or intrusiveness out of the entire online proctoring experience. A lot of that, I believe, is going to be a major trend. And lastly, I think almost everything also point towards the pervasiveness of the proctoring. So today we talk about high-stake exams being proctored, and but there are new assessment models being evolved, and there are a lot of new areas where we believe where proctoring is not used today. When it comes to exams, the adoption is going to increase. So we believe that proctoring going to be part and parcel of every evaluation experience which a learner would go through during their life cycle.
Thanks. And I think some of the things, summarising there, I think we've talked about new technologies, dual cameras, wearables, VA, VR and AR. And I think later on, our colleague Roman is going to be talking about the use of medical. So, so again, that essentially tends to be much more hands-on how you can think about how is it going to be used across there. So I'm sure we'll hear more about that from the experts in that field as well. You touched on hybrid. I think, again, that design from the beginning, I think, is one of the big things. Will technology allow that to be much more seamless? And I think, as you touched on, designing it from the candidate's perspective. Again, this isn't something that's being forced upon them. It's been designed with them in mind. I think, again, it's probably a shift from where we were to where we're going to be in the future. Actually, they should be at the heart of this. And I think it sounds very nice and fluffy to talk about that. But I think that's what we hope to see. I think moving on to look at AI, I think one of the things we talked about, the rise of AI, obviously, we talked, Pat's and his panel just been talking about how it's being used and its impact. And Sanjay, you said there about what it can and can't do maybe and how it gets things right. So what do you see as, how could AI and sort of machine learning things be integrated to help improve the process? Because again, I think a lot of people respect now that sort of a human is a part of the process in a lot of cases. Obviously, there are AI only solutions, but there are always, a human tends to have the final say. So
that's right.
What's your view in terms of how we're going to see AI and sort of machine learning move forward as we go into the future?
Sure. And I will say the last session was fantastic. I felt like they covered a lot of, the different ways the AI can be implemented into human assisted, into different design elements. I think one of the key things, and again, I'll go back to the test taker and the candidate experience, is when we think a lot about AI and human assisted AI. So, I'll give you an example of that there is a proctor there, but that AI is implemented into the system. AI is creating scalability, is creating accuracy, most importantly, because often during these assessments, even if it's a live proctored solution, there is a human, to Sanjo's point. There is false negatives. There are things that are very limited. All of you see my environment from this cue, right? Which is, to Rachel's point, why secondary cameras and more visibility of the room is so important. But then there's this other element that is in real time technology and AI and things that are assisting a live person become so important, because we all know that within assessment, intervention can be one of the most dangerous things, right? To the viability of the exam, to the test taker's experience in general. And so I think that's one element that, we talk about often, that utilizing AI in a way that is lasering in on accuracy. So, there were great points about scalability and reach and what a benefit that is, utilizing AI within a system, which is true. But, when you start implementing these technologies, again, putting the candidate at the heart, within the design, to say where and when is it appropriate to intervene, testing that, being transparent about that model. So, kind of my second point is, when we talk a lot about AI, there is a lack of research in general and transparency about the field of AI. There's more now, I would say more post-COVID, than ever, but there still is a lot of question of this ambiguous, what is AI? What does it mean? And I think that's also going to be something that we have to focus on, is being transparent by also educating the test program how it works, right? Or whoever our client is, but being very transparent about our own research and sharing, and opportunities like this where we're not just sharing ideas, but, some research about what elements are being used and benefits and things of that nature in the industry. So that answered your question, and then some, probably, Paul.
It did. Rachel, where are you on this point?
Yeah, I completely agree with Ashley. I think, one of the things that AI will allow us to do is actually enhance, I think, the user experience and the interaction with the proctor. So I see it as not just being there to, maybe identify if something irregular happens during the test event itself, but also to help the proctor know what's the next step, right? So every testing program has different sets of rules, different sets of decisions. I always talk about deter, detect, decide, right? Deter what you can, detect what you couldn't deter, and then decide how you're going to handle it. So I'm going to pick on Sanjo for a minute, but if I see Sanjo pull up his cell phone, as a proctor, I might think, okay, I've seen it, I can note it, but does the testing program then want me to stop it? Does it want me to warn him? Does it want me to just report it, but allow him to keep going? As Ashley said, the interruption to the test taker can have an impact on validity, it can have an impact on their experience. At the same time, there are testing programs that absolutely would say if you have that kind of recording device available to you or that kind of unauthorized device available to you, I just want you to stop the exam. There's no reason to let them see additional content. And I think AI is going to help us not only with detection, but with decision. And I mentioned before, I also think it's going to help us with communication. I feel really strongly, right? If I want Sanjo to, follow certain rules, then I want to be able to give him those rules. Even if the test is in Japanese, I might need to give him those rules in German to make sure that he understands it if German is his native language. And so I think having those kinds of capabilities much more readily available to us, and as Sanjo said, at a cost that we can afford, I think has some really exciting possibilities for the use of AI.
And I think the language on it, we've touched on it a couple of times, I think it's a really interesting one, because I think a lot of the time people see proctoring as an English-based service at most of the places around the world. And again, I think I've seen in other organizations that, people have started to devolve into like Arabic and to Chinese as well.
Right.
And it should be a global service, as you say, and it seems ignorant almost to say it should just be English, and that's how and so you've got to always be native speaker of English to understand the rules, and then you're caught out. And that's one of the things that I've always struggled with, is seeing people perceive proctoring or online proctoring as something to catch someone out. It's not. It should be there to support the candidate experience and the assessment. It's not there to catch someone. It might catch someone who's trying to cheat, but it's not the purpose of it. And I think sometimes people get so obsessed with how can we catch someone out, what can we do, and then the AI and the technology around it is saying, well, what else can we do to capture them? It's like, well, no, how can we support them? And that should be what's most important. Sanjo, I know obviously your organisation uses AI a lot in their solutions. What do you see as going forward on this, and how it can continue to support this?
Yeah, I think we see proctoring as one of the perfect use cases for AI. When we typically employ AI, we are looking at scalability, we are looking at improving accuracy, and then we are also looking at experience. And proctoring is where all three are equally important. And in some odd ways is also a use case where probably candidates are okay with not having a lot of human touch during the exam, because they don't want distraction. They don't want somebody to be looking at them or prompting them when they're doing the exam. But an area where I think beyond what Rachel and Ashley spoke about, where AI can also be used is in the effective onboarding of the candidate to the exam experience. A lot of times we've seen that especially candidates who are probably going to do an exam online for the first time, or doing an exam in a computer-based environment for the first time. They need a lot of assistance. And in a remote proctored environment, the proctor is managing multiple candidates. It often becomes a time constraint to ensure that everybody is able to go through that entire onboarding experience in a smooth manner. But I think AI can be used significantly to enhance, understand where the user is getting stuck intuitively, and then give them the just-in-time assistance, which makes the entire onboarding experience significantly better.
No, I think it's right. And obviously, the other session we covered on AI. So for people who want to listen, I promise we'll move on from AI at some point as well. But it is a really important point, I think, for the future. And one of the things I did, we're going to talk about. Everyone says ChatGPT, and everyone probably either groans or thinks, "Oh, here we go again." But I asked it just before the session started. We want to talk about is something like ChatGPT or generative AI a threat or an opportunity for online proctoring? So I asked it that question. And it was very non-committal. I was very disappointed. It said, its words were, "I'm neither a threat or an opportunity." It's like disappointing. It's like hedging its bets, which way I was going to go with that. But does that sort of more generative AI, what does that mean for online proctoring going forward? Because I've seen, from my perspective, when I've looked at it, certainly in the UK, we've seen a lot of universities potentially move away from things like open book exams, thinking, I can't go to that now. I can't do essay type questions in your own home, because you're going to sit at home, put a question into ChatGPT, give me a response. And, so even the mainstream media in the UK now are picking up on the threat to non-proctored or non-supervised assessment. So what do you see the impact of that being on online proctoring going forward?
Yeah, so I think, like you said, in short term, this is going to significantly drive demand for online proctoring, because you cannot change your exam models or the way the design of exams overnight. It takes time, and especially since COVID, there has been over reliance on take-home assessments and do it yourself kind of exams, and now ChatGPT and students are always using multiple means to solve for those exams. But I think ChatGPT has made that entire the amount of effort required to do that has come down significantly, and without any form of plagiarism detection, without any easy way to detect any form of malpractice. I think ChatGPT has reduced the friction so much that now online proctoring, I believe, is going to be a mandate for almost all kind of exams, and that's what we are seeing with our customer base as well. We've seen significant increase in demand from organizations who have been doing open book exams. But I think that's in short term. But in long term, what we could also see, and obviously these exams models are going to change, you and even expectations from what skills humans need to have, because if AI can do a lot of things which we are expected to do today, from writing to drawing to even thinking, being creative, I think a lot of those aspects are being taken away from humans. So then what do I think then it some of the conversations, I was in another panel a couple of weeks back, and some of the conversation around exam design and what skills are going to be desired from a human. A lot of conversations were around humans are going to be so powerful with all this technology at their in their reach, that a lot of focus will be on when you give someone access to this technology, about their integrity, their ethics. And so I think the kind of exams which are going to measure these aspects are going to be very different, and but at the same time you still want to ensure that the person who is taking the exam is the same person they are, and they are a lot of focus is around aspects like digital identity and verification of identity, and creating a I would say life cycle of identity management across various things which they do in different stages of learning and work and other aspects of their professional life. That becomes very, very important. So I believe online proctoring already has a component of identity management and candidate authentication, but that becomes more and more relevant, where verification of the individual's identity and what they are doing and how they're doing in every stage where they are being evaluated will become kind of crucial for the entire space, and that could become an even bigger part of online proctoring.
And Richard, I think in your, I know you have two hats. You have your Cornerstone Strategies hat, and also you see many things there, and also your Examity hat as well. What are you hearing from your clients, the people you talk to at conferences? I know you're very active in the conference circuit as well. What are you sort of hearing about?
Yeah, I think there's, initially the sky is falling. What are we going to do with this new technology? And I think, I think it's important to remember ChatGPT, while always confident in its responses, is not always right. So it is a little bit of a, use at your own risk kind of tool. If test takers are using that, there are still test taker behaviors and technology tells that we should be looking for during online proctoring. Those would be very difficult to find if the essay writing is not online proctored. One of the things I remind people is, getting well-designed essays is not new. Now it's a lot cheaper with ChatGPT. But, there have been essay mills, there has been Chegg, there have been other tools out there for a long time. ChatGPT just does it faster and for less expense. So I think, talking with candidates and talking to, not candidates, but clients, and talking with testing programs around, here are still the behaviors, here are still the technology tells that we want to continue to watch for in the short term is really important. I also think that, Sanjo, I think, you're so spot on in saying, as we look at technology becoming more capable of ingesting large amounts of data and being capable of really kind of coming alongside of us and providing help, it does start to, change some of the structure of what we may want to be testing in terms of competencies or knowledge or skills. And I do think it's going to have an impact writ large on the education, assessment, and workforce space. And I think the fact that it's going to impact all three spaces means we are also going to find tools that help us determine when's it right to incorporate AI. When is that a good thing for us to be allowing a test taker to use, for example? We had a somewhat similar step in our evolutionary history within the assessment space when it came to calculators. And there was a lot of concern over, do you let someone use calculators? Well, use of calculators just, make people incapable of doing math. Maybe, but I think, we still have to know the basics and we still have to understand the functions. And I think it's going to probably be a similar wrestling within the learning and assessment workforce space as to what are the boundaries when AI is appropriate and when do we need to, incorporate that as part of the assessment, as part of the learning journey, as part of the expectations of the workforce. And I think as we understand that more, I think we'll have a better sense of, what that does from a proctoring perspective. But I absolutely agree with Sanjo. From a current perspective right now, one of the best ways to make sure that you're getting authentic responses is to have an online proctor. Whether, you're doing constructed responses or multiple choice tests, to make sure that those responses are authentic.
Absolutely. And sorry, Paul, were you going to go ahead?
I was going to say, actually, I know we've got sort of 10 minutes left. I want to, one of the things I want to cover with you, I think, and pick up with you on just briefly was the regulatory landscape. I think obviously is also changing around this. And I think what do we see? How is that going to affect online proctoring? So we've seen things like PIPL in China and how they're sort of cracking down on how personal information can go across borders. We've seen various cases in the US, I think, which maybe have been misinterpreted, but are still they make a headline and then the damage is done. So what do we see? I think for the future of online proctoring, where is regulation and where is the sort of the service going to balance out?
I think it will continue to evolve. I think you're going to continue to see people say that, my data is my data. I want to be able to control it. I want to know it's protected. I want to be able to say, I don't want this particular vendor or organization to hold my data anymore. I think the more we start to look at, Ashley was talking about the ability to put together a more longitudinal picture of someone's performance. So instead of just a snapshot in time, that we'll have these regular interactions with people. That obviously means whatever entity is having those regular interactions has more data about me, about my child, about a spouse. And there's a trade-off there, right? There's a trade-off when we're saying we want to be able to leverage what online proctoring can provide us, such as seeing into our homes. We want to be able to leverage the benefits of having longitudinal assessments so that I'm not just judged on a snapshot, 2-hour exam, but you can look at my progress over months. And the trade-off then is trusting whomever is gathering that information or whomever is providing those services to handle those well. And, I think we have seen concerns, rightfully so, that some organizations have abused those privileges. And so that's part of, I think, an evolutionary change in how the law is handling personal data, how it's handling AI and the potential for bias, how it's handling biometrics. I don't think that's going to stop. So in terms of balancing it, I think the services that we provide, Ashley had mentioned transparency. One of the fundamental principles, right, of privacy is being transparent and clear about who has your data, what are they doing with it, how are they using it, how can you get it back? I think that is absolutely going to continue. And I think testing organizations as well as test vendors are going to need to continue to evolve their services, their infrastructure, and their data use policies to keep pace with that. the law is always lagging behind, what's happening. And so these pushes for privacy rights, for bias and discrimination determinations, those are sort of grassroots in a way, pushes that now the law is coming behind and starting to codify. But that's not going to change over time. So I absolutely think that we're going to continue to keep an eye on that as we continue to see a shift in not only online proctoring and assessment, but a shift in learning and a shift in what's happening in the workforce, because those are all kind of occurring concurrently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'll add to that. I mean, Rachel nailed it, transparency. And then we see this inflection of really testing programs want to, go cross borders. They want to grow internationally. They want to be able to offer, especially through Reach or through online proctoring. And whether this is, professional testing programs or institutions, they want to offer their programs across state lines, internationally, globally, right? So there's global expansion and interest happening, while there's also this intersection of tightened policies around privacy. So, I think it is our responsibility, and we represent, vendors, with one of Rachel's hats, but, Sanjo, Rachel, and I represent vendors that, I think we all take very seriously our responsibility in ensuring we're compliant and being transparent about it. And, for testing programs, doing due diligence to make sure all of these things are set in place, right? And to Rachel's points, test takers understanding it. I think that became very, the number one headline probably in response to COVID is test takers and some being forced to use the technology they were not familiar with. And then you just create incredible friction, right? That kind of had to talk about, put in the open space, explain, and once there is that explanation and understanding, then, the conversation can happen and there is transparency there. But
Yeah.
Sanjay, please.
I think privacy and data security, we believe, are supremely important, and at Talvi, we are very serious about that, and I think all of our peers are also. And some of the areas which we have been exploring in this area is around self-custody of identity, which will allow test takers to authenticate everything which they're doing in online proctoring without having to share any information, any private information with us as a provider. So we've been exploring some of the use cases around that. And we've also are always focused on also educating the learners or candidates about their importance of privacy and data security. So many times inadvertently they would release information which we wouldn't want them to release. And I think that there's as a vendor at the forefront of it, there is a lot we all can do in terms of educating the learners also about importance of these aspects and how do they take care of their privacy and data security when they're managing a lot of their learning experience online.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you do touch on that a lot there. I think during COVID, a lot of people, I think also some of these things just got put to the back burner. They actually thought the most important thing was we need to test. And then students and other people were just thinking we need to get the test done, and almost not to the point of we don't care, but getting the test done was the most important thing. Continuing education was the most important thing. And I think we've started to see, I think I said you had cases in the US. I think we had some bad experiences here in the UK where I think one of the leading, I think it was the Bar Standards Board or someone like that, had a really bad experience with online proctoring, and probably the worst people to pick up a fight with a bunch of barristers. So that was the sort of these sort of bad experiences I think across the world. So I think it's really important. I think you say what we're going to see is the law is behind itself, and that law trying to catch up and see what's happening, and how we as testing programs that do operate globally can always continue to can operate and still succeed and expand and offer the services to students. And I think just finally, we've got 5 minutes left. One of the things I want to touch on, which is really important and one of my sort of passions, is around how online proctoring in the future can help bridge this digital divide. So I think we've seen a huge shift to digital assessment, which is great and helps open up the world and assessment to lots of people, but also it actually ends up causing a problem for certain places, parts of the world, or certain people and parts of the world who don't have access to this technology. So potentially online proctoring becomes what you guys think becomes a tool to actually help bridge this digital divide a bit. I know, Ashley, I've come to you first.
Sure. So, yes, just shifting from kind of the privacy and regulatory discussion, I think by number one thing that we talk about, and, especially in industry and even upcoming conferences in ATP, is talking about overall, equity and access that comes with online proctoring. I mean, I know this is one of the mission things that we always come back to. That's kind of like, this is why we do what we do. But, the fact that, we've talked about even throughout this session, the investment in technologies is all about access, right? More technologies, so testing programs feel their security in online proctoring so they can offer it around the world. Investments in data retention policies and privacy and security. So there's global access all around the world, as well as, making sure that our platforms and the technology we're actually offering can, there's bandwidth and all those other things that come with it, right? To where there's access and equity. So I think I love this question and kind of ending on it, because I feel like, for me, this is why I'm here, right? This is why I work in this industry. I do love testing, but, there has to be something mission driven, I think, attached to it. So absolutely, I think, like I said, reasons for continuing investment and why, so much hyper focus on this industry. And I think, expanding it, being transparent, sharing ideas in industry is a huge way to do that, if, what other folks are doing, and et cetera. So, yeah.
Yeah, I echo the same. I believe COVID and the changes with respect to remote work and remote learning becoming more pervasive also opened up opportunities for individuals across the globe. But one key component of that and their enablement is ensuring that they can take these exams, they can take these go through these programs without, irrespective of where they are and what mobility restrictions they might have. They might be a housewife with kids now trying to get back to work, or they might be somebody with some form of physical disabilities, or they might not have a large device which is traditionally used for testing. So ensuring that irrespective of their individual situations, they have the ability to be part of these programs and have an opportunity to build the best career for themselves, irrespective of these limitations, is I think core to what Talview does. And I believe a lot of us here share the same sentiment. And that's, at the end of the day, that's the thing which drives all of us to do what we do on a day-to-day basis.
I'll just really quickly, Paul, I know we need to wrap up. I'll just really quickly say, if our assessments do good in the world, and I do believe they do, then our goal should be to reach as many people as possible. And I think online proctoring has absolutely opened that door wider. There is infrastructure. I live in Iowa, and we have a third of our counties are broadband deserts. So there are places where that is still not feasible to work and to happen easily, but it doesn't mean we should stop and just say, well, it just doesn't work. I think hybrid offerings will continue, and I think online proctoring will continue because an online assessment, because online learning and online work is here. It's not going to go away, and it's opened doors to millions of people, and that's not going to end.
Thank you, Rachel. And I agree. I think if we can, as technology companies, service providers, provide that in continued investment and innovation around how do we reduce the bandwidth, how do we reduce the things that are the demand on students to access our assessments. That's really important while still maintaining that security level. So that's why I think we're in for an interesting few years as we sort of now go into this sort of post-COVID phase of online proctoring. So thank you all for your time. It's been really interesting. It's great to talk to you, and we'll bring back Graham to before the next session. Thank you, Graham.
Thank you.
Hi, guys. Thank you very, very much. Thank you, Paul, for chairing, and Ashley, Rachel, and Sanjo for such an interesting session. I think Rachel's summary there about, wanting to promote the use of digital learning and technology, and this being the mechanism is just spot on. So thank you ever so much. So we're going to take a break now. We have 10 minutes. We'll be back at 15:45 GMT. The 30-second timer will go up with the jingly music, so that'll just remind you to get back ready. And we're going to pick up with Ramana Moss, one of the other board members, who will be introducing us to the use of technology in the medical context. So thank you very much. See you after the break. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a good break, managed to go and get that cuppa ready for the final round. And we have a great session that is coming up about online assessment in the medical context. I'm going to introduce you now to Romana Moss, one of the board members, who's going to be leading this session, and she'll take it forward and introduce our participants from here on, and then I'll wind up briefly at the end. Over to you, Romana.
Great. Hello, everybody. Nice to see you today. I've heard some great things about the sessions today. I unfortunately couldn't make it earlier. I was attending a committee meeting, but I'm looking forward to watching back and hearing all the good stuff that I've been seeing going on LinkedIn and Twitter. So I'm very pleased to introduce to you now Adam and Tom, who are with us from My Knowledge Map, and they're going to talk to you a bit about some of the work they've been doing about online assessments in a medical context and the challenges that that can bring that we might not face in other environments. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Adam and Tom to get away with their presentation.
Okay, thanks, Romana. I'll just give you a quick introduction. So my name's Adam Doyle. So I'm the Managing Director of My Knowledge Map. We provide assessment software to predominantly universities, and we have a very heavy focus on practice-based or work-based placed assessments. So covering kind of very, very longitudinal assessments, mainly within healthcare and veterinary. So we support nurses, doctors, vets, dentistry, midwives. And Tom's just going to share with you for the next kind of 10 minutes some of the challenges that touch on some of the topics we talked about earlier today. So I'll just hand over to Tom.
Okay, thanks a lot, Adam. So what I'll try and do is just share my screen. So just bear with me a sec. Oh dear, sorry, just bear with me a sec.
There's nothing like trying to share your screen, is there, across a platform with people watching you that makes it well. While you're doing that, Tom,
Can you see that? Sorry, no.
Not
okay.
at the moment, no, but I'll just introduce Andrew Croydon, who's going to talk after Tom, you and Adam have talked. And Andrew is from the Association of the British Pharmaceutical Industry. So Andrew will be talking after Adam and Tom, and we'll also be joined by Lorella from TestReach, who will join our panel discussion after the presentations from Adam and Tom and Andrew. So I think, Tom, if you can send the slides across, we could make them available our end if that would help. I've just seen a message from Gareth backstage. And in the meantime, if anyone has any questions or comments, do let us know and we will answer them as soon as we can. And hi, Lorella has joined us. So Lorella, we're just doing introductions while Adam and Tom share their presentation. So Lorella will be joining us for our panel discussion after their presentations. Great.
Thank you.
So I think while we're doing that, do you want to, Andrew and Lorella, do you want to just introduce yourselves while we're sorting out screen sharing? Andrew, if you go first.
Yes. Thank you. A real pleasure to be here this afternoon. So I'm Andrew Croydon, Director of Skills and Education, Policy and Examinations at the ABPI, which stands for the Association of the British Pharmaceutical Industry. There's a number of things that we're doing, and one of those elements is delivering professional qualifications for people that have certain roles in the industry. And obviously I'm here this afternoon to talk a bit more about that and how we deliver them and the transition that we make in terms of delivery. I think I obviously also had some technical issues too, so apologies if I've sent everyone into confusion, but great to be here now.
Yeah, and my name is Luella Morton. I'm co-CEO of TestReach. So we have a full end-to-end assessment system, and you can turn on remote invigilation. So we have our own team of a few hundred proctors, and we run a lot of proctored exams for a lot of the Royal Colleges and also a lot of the UK awarding bodies. So we're very well used to running high-stake exams, and it's all around that kind of, the meticulous nature of medical exams where, if you have a doctor who's relocating and all their family has moved country, you don't have the option for them not to be able to sit their exams. So our service is very much centered on ensuring that we get those candidates through the exam and they have a good quality experience.
Great, thank you, Luella. And I think we're all ready to go now. So, Tom, over to you.
Okay, thanks a lot. So hopefully you can see that now. So really what I want to talk about is the workplace-based side of assessment, which is something a little bit different, where obviously there are very similar challenges to other areas of assessment, but also some fairly significant differences. So I guess the first thing was this is where I had a few challenges in terms of sharing. This is where I wanted to. I've had a video embedded in my. There we go. Turn the audio off because it's actually in German, but I just wanted to give you a sense of what we mean by workplace-based assessment. So what we're looking at here is a scenario where you've actually got a patient who's this chap with the white hair in bed, and there are a couple of student doctors who are working with that patient in a live clinical environment. So in this case, they're taking his history and doing a physical examination and so on. And there's a doctor who's watching them doing this. And one of the students has handed over his iPhone, and that is then being used to capture feedback in the live clinical setting, and that feedback will then be uploaded online, and it'll be available for review by doctors back at the medical school. So if we could just switch back to the PowerPoint presentation. Really, that's the kind of basic situation that we're talking about here. So in terms of what's actually being assessed, I've got a couple of screenshots here, some examples of the sorts of things that people would tend to work with. We've got the on the left of this third slide, we've got what's called an entrustable professional activity. So this is a very typical type of assessment where a medical school will identify some procedures that they want to ensure that all of their student doctors are competent in by the end of their medical degree. They'll have some questions about what's been observed, some boxes that allow them to gather feedback, some different elements that the doctors in practice will be able to rate. The scale that you see here is a more old-fashioned scale where you're talking about expectations. Things have moved on recently, and people tend to talk more about to what extent you would trust the doctor to perform that procedure independently in the future. But in terms of what's being assessed, there are a whole range of different tools. So things like mini clinical evaluation exercises, which are being done not only through the clinical years of medical school, but also after medical school while the doctor's on the foundation programme in the NHS, and then when they go on to their specialty training. So across the maybe 5 years of their undergraduate medical training and then on into postgraduate medical training, they'll generate hundreds and hundreds of these very similar tools where they're being asked for feedback on the same thing over and over again in these live clinical environments. And I mean, we're just one provider of these systems, but over the last 12 months, our systems have processed 3.5 million assessments. We're currently seeing about 13,000 assessments per day across the nursing schools and medical schools that we work with. And a significant number of those, we work with about half the nursing students in the UK, but it's extremely high volumes of feedback that's being processed. And it's constant. So this gives you an idea of the volume. There are very high peaks as people hand over their shifts at around 3 p.m. But we've got assessments being processed all through every day and every night, even at weekends, you know, while the volume drops, we're still processing very large numbers of these forms. They're being worked with across, as I say, across the 5 years of a medical program. So it's lots and lots of data points across a very long period of time. This is an example of the sort of user interface that can then be used for students to review the feedback that they're getting, and for the doctors in the medical school to take that judgment at the end of the assessment. Within each of those years, you've got breakdown into multiple different types of tools that are being used to elicit feedback in different situations. And that'll vary depending on the context. So the system that we have will track the type of rotation that a student's on. So when you're going back and reviewing the feedback, you'll be able to compare things that happened on a pediatric rotation with things that happened on an emergency medicine rotation, and so on and so forth. And from the point of view of the staff back at the medical school who are having to understand and feedback on this, they need an interface which is going to make it very easy for them to review and find appropriate tools and appropriate bits of feedback. So this is an example of the sorts of kind of structures that medical schools can put in place around that. So all of this data, as I say, is then reviewed and interrogated by remote medical school staff, and they then determine whether students are on track to enter clinical practice, areas where they need more support, areas where they don't have enough evidence of good practice to actually complete the programme. So what we're talking about is real-time decisions on when students are assessed. So the students themselves are seeing these opportunities to be assessed and to hand over the appropriate tool to a doctor in practice. It could be any doctor in a hospital who can provide that feedback, or any member of the interprofessional team. That feedback process can be interrupted midstream. So you might have a doctor in an emergency setting where they're being interrupted by new cases coming in and having to pick that up later. And we have various ways of dealing with that so that they can then complete it over a gin and tonic at the end of the shift or whatever. There's lots of last minute switches to placements that happen due to logistical challenges in a hospital. So it is very difficult to predict where and when students can be assessed, and they're in very challenging environments. So a secure mental health setting is very much like a prison. There's no access to technology. Assessments are likely to happen in a staff breakout area outside the secure part, and so on and so forth. Because of issues around student access to IT in the NHS and so on, a lot of these assessments are happening on personal mobile devices, and there are all sorts of cultural issues associated with having a personal mobile device in practice. So particularly early on, there was the worry that if a patient sees a couple of doctors looking at a phone together, you know, are they looking up memes on social media or whatever? So in the early days, a lot of the medical schools put stickers on students' phones saying this is a learning tool, and so on and so forth. What we've tried to do is to make things very easy for the assessors who are providing feedback. As I say, these people may not have been trained by the university. So within the app, schools have to build in lots of instructions, make resources available for staff who are encountering this for the first time. So it often becomes the student who's taking on responsibility for driving the assessment process and identifying appropriate scenarios and coaching assessors. This obviously leads to issues around the authenticity of the feedback and issues around remote monitoring and intervention. So one of the key things, as we'll see in a sec, is how academics back at the medical school can draw on any conclusions from the vast amount of feedback and information. I did have a bit of an animation in the slide here, but I don't think that's going to work. But essentially what happens is that the medical schools push out the forms to the students, And then we have various ways of signing them off in practice. So there are various different ways that you could overcome these challenges. The way that we work is we have email sign off, and then the doctor in practice will receive an email alert to say you were recorded as having assessed such and such a doctor at such and such a time in such and such a place. As soon as the doctor's device is online, then the form will sync back to the system, where it will be available immediately for medical school staff to get a real-time view of what's going on there. So we use very rich dashboards to give people information both around engagement with the system. So this is an example of being able to see, we can very clearly see here that the top student hasn't actually engaged as much as they need to on this particular placement. A meeting that should have gone ahead hasn't done, so we've seen one of the blocks turning red. Whereas with some of the other students where they're actually meeting their goals, we've got a different shade of red where we actually know that they've seen the appropriate number of antenatal examinations to the right level in this case, and they're on track with the proficiencies that they need to get signed off in practice. So maybe with the first student, that would be where you'd look to take remedial action. With some of the medical schools, what we've tended to do is to create bespoke dashboards that are particularly targeted on their the requirements of their program. So this is an example of a medical school that's working with a number of entrustable professional activities, and by the end of the program, they're wanting to see some orange to kind of drive that through. And then we create similar types of dashboards which are targeted on their specific proficiencies and so on. So that's really the way that the process works. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. But from the point of view of the medical school academics, what they get are these sorts of dashboard views where they're able to see across time more of these darker blues coming in, and that illustrates the students being ready for independent practice.
Great. Thank you, Tom. That's very comprehensive overview, and also gives you an idea of some of the challenges, particularly around technology and the NHS. From previously in my career, I know that technology and the NHS do not go hand in hand, although I believe they're now no longer on Windows 10, but who knows, they may be. So just to save some time, I will ask Andrew to do his presentation now, and then we will have a panel discussion around some of the limitations around remote invigilation and assessment in a medical environment. And Luella, I only invited yesterday due to missing an email in my inbox. I'm being very transparent here, so I didn't think it was fair to ask Luella to come to write a presentation overnight, so we will be having a good panel discussion. So over to you, Andrew, and about some of the remote invigilation you've been doing.
Thank you very much indeed. That's much appreciated. It's great to be here and to share my story and to answer any questions that I can when we come to those. So I've said that I'm Education, Skills and Examinations Director at the ABPI, the Association of the British Pharmaceutical Industry. Just to put that into context, we exist to make the UK the best place in the world to research, to develop, to use, to provide to patients medicines and vaccines, both those that are of today and for the future. So it's very important work, as we've heard of very important work from the other people on the panel too. As you might expect, some of our, or certainly a number of our industry interact with healthcare professionals. Realistically, on a day-to-day basis, we're working with many different stakeholders, whether that's government, the NHS, academia, and so forth. And obviously, we're doing that to try and move things forward and transform lives for people. So in so doing, we think about how our people who work across the industry are competent and fit to practice. And there is an arm's length body, the PMCPA, the Prescription Medicines Code of Practice Authority, who effectively are overseeing the ethics, the morals, the way of working of the whole industry. And within their code of practice, within the code of practice that's been out for quite some time that gets updated, there are various different clauses that relate to ways in which people work and mandatory competency. So it's very important for us that we make sure people are working to those particular standards. So the ABPI, actually as far back as the 1960s, introduced what was termed the ABPI exam, which was introduced for people who were interacting on a face-to-face basis with healthcare professionals in relation to promotion of prescription medicines. The ABPI is a member organisation, and we have small, medium enterprises as well as large enterprises that are part of our membership. So I suspect, well-known companies that you've heard in the news in the last few years or so are certainly our members, but equally as our small, medium enterprises. But it doesn't matter about the size of the company. Across all those companies, some of which are UK-based, some of which are European and global, it's important that within the UK, the people are working to the right standards. So in introducing this examination, it was to examine people, and it became enshrined in the PMCPA's work. So within the code of practice for the industry, it's enshrined as a mandatory qualification for people with certain roles. However, over time, the reputation of the exam, the prestigiousness of it, you will find, in fact, there are many people who take it for whom it's not mandatory. So they're in other allied roles. So collectively, that means there are a large number of people going through the qualification each year. And it's obviously changed significantly since the 1960s. And in 2014, it became an accredited qualification, and our accrediting body is Ofqual regulated. So understandably, I guess, now we refer to them as high stakes examinations that we are delivering. And of course, people's careers, people's jobs and so forth rely on taking that qualification and passing that qualification. So they must take it within 1 year of starting in industry, and they must pass it within 2 years of working in industry. And moving into 2020, so at the end of 2019, we were looking at how we delivered the examination, of which there are a number of different units and modules, and there's more than one qualification, but we were looking at how we delivered it, and to what extent our mode of delivery was meeting current 21st century, if you like, approach to examinations. So we knew there was a project to do in terms of seeing how that was done and whether that needs to evolve. However, I probably don't need to remind anybody that come 2020, we obviously hit a global pandemic. So I recall very vividly in March 2020, when we were looking at the face-to-face exam that we were going to deliver for that month, because we used to do it in one of 4 or 5 locations around the UK, where candidates would travel to that location, sit these exams. We had morning sessions and afternoon sessions, depending on which units we were talking about. Some units compulsory, some units not. And I remember quite clearly looking in March 2020, realizing that there was going to be potentially an issue with delivering that face-to-face exam, in terms of looking out for the safety and welfare of our invigilation team, also looking out for the safety and welfare of the candidates going to it. And in actual fact, because it was pre-lockdown, we were able to run a session with just a handful of people for whom at that point it was time sensitive, so they still needed to pass their exam by the end of that month. So we delivered it, and that was in actual fact the last time we ran a face-to-face exam, although we didn't know it was going to be at the time. Clearly following that, we sort of sped up our work on how else we might deliver the exam, and obviously clearly it became a priority that we need to look for alternative solutions, as did many exam providers at the time, as you will all be aware. So for us, that meant looking at what were the sort of digital applications and options for delivering exams. We looked at artificial intelligence, live monitoring, deployment of sort of sophisticated different security features, face matching technology, ID verification, many different aspects from the technical side, because we knew that they were high stakes exams. We wanted to maintain the integrity of the exam. That was really important. And as we talked it through with our independent exam governance committee, with the PMCPA, with our accrediting body, we made it quite clear these were the different points that we wanted to make sure that we ensured that were still in place if we were to go down the route of digital delivery. At that point, we still thought, as I'm sure many others did, that face-to-face might resume at some point, and perhaps we might have 4 or 5 months without an exam, but let's not hang around, let's carry on investigating that. And in fact, we had lots of conversations as well with other professional bodies from different sectors who deliver professional exams, looking at what they were already using, perhaps from a digital perspective. We also looked at our sister organisations around the world in terms of, you know, some of those sister organisations had already moved over to digital delivery long before COVID hit us. Others were in the same place as us using face-to-face examinations. So we were collecting a lot of evidence and gathering those different thoughts. You know, of course, we spoke to our candidates and surveyed them as well. We spoke to our member companies. So massive project collecting all that information and looking at what might or might not work for us. And then, of course, discussing it with various different companies that had different offerings and to what extent they might meet our needs, and looking at areas where we would not compromise. And if a solution for such and such was not feasible, then I'm sorry, but we wouldn't be taking it any further with them. So fast forward a little bit from that, as we move towards the end of the summer of 2020, we thought by then that we had a potential solution, and we sort of whittled it down to 2 providers that might be able to provide what we needed. Alongside that, though, within the project, we already knew that we had to update our CRM and our whole booking system. And so when we were looking at the different options for online digital delivery, we were also doing it in terms of looking at what would integrate with a new CRM system and how we can try and make a seamless candidate journey, you know, for the benefit of the candidates. Fast forward a little bit further again, by September 2020, we were in a position to pilot the use of one-to-one proctoring. So, you know, if you explore different digital options, clearly there's different ranges in terms of the level of security that's available. But for us, as I've said, high stakes examinations, we wanted to go for the top level of security. So the one that we piloted came with the ability to have a lockdown browser, which was a definite for us. Now that did subsequently cause a few problems, because as we spoke to our member companies, as you perhaps might imagine, those companies have very strict IT regulations and firewalls, etc., in themselves. And so given that not all candidates that we have, but a large number of candidates that we have will be working in companies and will be using a company laptop to undertake the exam, installing the lockdown browser, meaning that someone can't be on another tab looking up something on the internet and such, wasn't necessarily straightforward. You know, and we had candidates trying to get their IT team to let them install this, and then it would go from the UK director of IT to the global head of IT. So, you know, there were some hurdles there, but from our perspective, we needed to have that lockdown browser in place. We needed to have one-to-one proctoring as well, so one person watching that person do the exam, because at that point we felt the AI technology wasn't necessarily there. I feel the AI technology does have its benefits, and in time, you know, can be perhaps for us might be a complementary thing, but we weren't in a position to feel that it was there at that point to rely solely on that. So we went down the route of the one-to-one proctoring. You know, and as we pressed on and carried on with those pilots, obviously we learned some lessons from those pilots, and those pilots were conducted alongside rewriting, you know, completely rewriting our exam regulations for a different mode of exam delivery, but also looking at other policies that we might need to introduce, thinking also preempting as much as one can, you know, the element of malpractice and how we might mitigate against that. And throughout all of this, you know, we've always tried to make sure we've got robust policies in place, because we can't control other people's behaviour. And as we know, you know, people who want to try and cheat will do so no matter what the mode of delivery of the exam is, whether it's face-to-face or online. So from our perspective, it was important to have as many security features in place as possible, and also have to have robust policies in place for investigating any cases of malpractice, should there be any. So fast forward further, after a couple more pilots, we seem to be getting a good level of success. And as we moved into 2021, we were able to go wholesale with delivering exams online. In actual fact, we had quite a backlog of candidates, so we delivered a lot of exams in those first few months of 2021, because we had people that had either been on furlough, or perhaps we had people who had been studying because they hadn't been able to engage with HCPs. So a lot of people who wanted to deliver the exams, and we got through that, and there were many people that passed, and there were many success stories. And by September of 2021, we were also able to launch our bespoke platform that integrated the online exams, the third-party proctors, the booking system, the online store, everything all in one place to try and give our candidates the best possible user experience as possible. Have we had hurdles to overcome? Yes, we have, and perhaps some of those will come up in the questions, but hopefully that's a good overview for people to be thinking about, because I'm conscious of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. It's quite a complicated world when you take into the medical profession, because it's so personal to everyone. We are all the customers of all the healthcare providers and professionals of which we assess and progress through their training program and ensure their CPD is up to date. We're all customers of our trainees, our candidates. So Luella, from your experience there, do you think that RI in healthcare and medical education is held to a higher standard than other sectors, or is it more emotive, or what do you think of the difference between RI or remote assessment in healthcare across other industries?
Well, I definitely think in the medical arena, the ante goes up significantly. There is a real, it has to be meticulous. There is, a real focus on the candidate experience. Yes, there's that sense of gravitas, and of course there has to be the integrity of the exam must be preserved. But there's also that absolute imperative that each candidate is treated with, absolute, that they have a quality experience. And I think, it is, our medical customers expect the best, and they don't, they have very high standards and they expect them to be met. I think there is also a need for, any invigilators must be on point, must be on message. If you cannot have the wrong rules given out for any test, it must be a level playing field for everybody. There must be customer support people there who are absolutely dealing with queries very, very quickly. It's unacceptable to have people waiting or to have an information vacuum. It has to be passed through. And I think as well, security is paramount. There has to be very, very robust processes in place to deal and ensure that the security integrity is maintained. And I also do think that, particularly in the medical arena, you see an awful lot more importance placed on ensuring that there is a broad spectrum of capabilities for candidates who have special needs. So it's not just about adding reasonable adjustments. Particularly with our medical customers, you tend to see a lot of candidates who maybe have accommodations around having a reader who's allowed, maybe be a family member who assists them in reading the text on the screen, who may be allowed lots more of comfort breaks, who may be allowed different snacks or different things that are allowed. So that level of flexibility to accommodate those kind of different rules and different accommodations for people is really, really important. And we see that as being quite a big differentiator with the medical exams. So I do think it's quite, and the other thing is the exams tend to be quite long. Some of our medical customers run 5-hour exams. Now they may be multi-part, but there's logistics there around, if they're taking a break between, how long is that break, ensuring everyone has the same break, ensuring there's no early access. You have to have the parts properly controlled. So it's very tight and it's very high standards and it's very meticulous. But that's what you need. That's where proctoring has to get to for across the board. It shouldn't be a kind of hit and miss thing where candidates can't complete their exams.
No, I'd agree, Luella. I think we have 2 3-hour exams. As for one of our exams, that's 6 hours in a day. If you add on additional requirements for additional time, it's very hard. Adam, what have you had to do any adaptations for your remote assessment for people with reasonable adjustments? Has that been challenging, or how's that overcome?
It hasn't been as challenging as you think, mainly because the kind of candidates that we have most of the time are doctors and nurses, and you have to have a particular set of standards to become a nurse or a doctor. So they're kind of, there's a certain competency of practice that they need to maintain, where you don't tend to get them adjustments. But certainly in the more some of the other topics, then they do have to have more adjustments. But we find that most people in practice, they're in a live environment. There's no real, if you've got a patient who you're trying to diagnose, then there's no real adjustments you can make. You need to get on and do it. And the assessments, based on that. So within our sector so far, we don't tend to see that.
Oh, that's an interesting one, isn't it? It's all live, so there's no additional requirements. They're there in front of you. What you're going to do, how are you going to treat them? That's presents its own unique challenges, doesn't it? And Andrew, what are the attitudes around like AI for RI in your institution? Are they pro, or is there some concern there? Or
well, first and foremost, it's always about whatever the option is, to what extent does it maintain the current standards? You know, we're really hot on these are the standards that we deliver to. We need to maintain them no matter what. So I would say, you know, we can't rely on the AI because the technology is not there at the moment, and there's certainly not appetite for relying on it as the sole method of supporting delivery. However, as the technology becomes more advanced, you know, there's appetite for it being a further add-on. Would be from our perspective. You know, we think we've secured something as best we can that you know that is maintaining our standards. Does that mean we don't need to continue to look at it? Of course not. If there is new technology that comes along, new ways of delivering on the platform or something else that adds another level, because of course, you know, in any setting for any sector, there'll be the candidate who comes up with some new way of, oh, I don't know, we need to look at that, how we can do that. So, you know, I'm pro for it, looking at it in terms of it complementing what we already have.
Yeah, it's so good. What do you think if you could change one attitude amongst your colleagues, or this is to everyone in the panel, so if you could change one attitude in colleagues where you face a barrier to be more innovative with online assessment and exams, what would that attitude change be? I don't know if anyone wants to take this first.
In terms of where we kind of pick up, then it is mainly around accepting AI more. I know it seems that we've focused AI a lot on today's session, but it is around using it to help people, not using it for people to be worried about, and that's going to take a little time. But certainly, our students do hundreds and hundreds of assessments, so using AI to spot where students are struggling or where there's an issue with the kind of quality of the work, or there's an issue where they're trying to be fraudulent, or there's an issue where they're struggling, and using AI to detect that over a longer period of time would be really interesting. And there's lots of ethical issues around that, using AI to detect if students are troubling or they're in stress during an exam or during an assessment, which would be really interesting, but it opens up more debates than it kind of closes down at the minute.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Andrew, do you want to go next, and then Luella, and then I think it'll be time to end our session. Go on, Andrew.
Yeah, I think just for us, you know, the use of AI, as I say, would be complementary to what we have. So from our perspective, or from my perspective, it's not necessarily a difficult sell to colleagues, to the exam governance committee and so forth, if it's proven to be effective and it's an add-on, because, you know, anything that makes, you know, if there's a case of malpractice, anything that we have that makes our evidence even more robust, then that's a good thing. It would be a difficult sell if I was suggesting it replace the one-to-one proctoring and everything that we have in place. So we're certainly not in that position. But who knows in the future? You know, I like to see how things evolve, and I'm always open to ideas.
And Luella?
Sorry, I think there's there's a lot of limitations on the technology at the moment. I mean, yes, you can have detection, and it can be there's automated technologies that can help a lot in the proctoring process, but ultimately humans need to be in front and center in it. If you're really getting into, you know, detecting subtle eye movements, no technology is going to detect that. And I think that you know, the technology is continually evolving, and I think there's a lot more to come, but it's not there at the moment in terms of being really fit for purpose as a standalone. I think on paper, you know, say a record and review solution, you know, you can say, well, on paper that should work. But in practice, you could end up reviewing loads of false positives. Even if it's well calibrated, you still will run into issues. So I do think it's, you know, on paper can be very different from practice. And I think that technology is improving all the time, but there's nothing like humans in terms of processing images and processing video.
Hey, thank you for those final remarks on that question. I think for me, one of the biggest barriers I've got is people who are further on in their careers, etc. accepting that things have changed and that we can't go back to the way things were, and it's becoming comfortable, and bringing people with you, I think, is still the biggest barrier I have, because I was at the AA meeting yesterday as part of the assessment, and I said I regularly get asked, are you going back to paper? Because it's what people knows and trust work. And I was like, no, we've been going on like test centers, CBT, RI for the last 3 years. No, we're not going back. But there is still that, oh, it's a phase. No, it's not a phase. And like Andrew and Adam and you've said, it's about how we work with it now to get the best out of, make sure our exams are delivered the best, the assessments are delivered the best. And it's a real compliment, which I think all of us have said while I've been talking today. So I think if we had a live orchestra, they'd be start to play me off stage because it's the Oscars this weekend. I'd start to be played off stage while I've got my my award in hand. So thank you all for your time today. It's been really interesting seeing how assessment and examinations differ, and thinking about the standards to which we are held. And I think RI and online invigilation are held to a higher standard than even CBT in a test centre for some reason. I think it feels the further and further it gets away from human interaction, the higher and higher we put those perceived standards on. But Graham's here, he's about to show me off stage. I'm going to sweep across in my glamorous gown with my Oscar in hand and say thank you all, good night. But thank you all, panel. It's been a really great discussion.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank you,
very much.
Romana. Thank you, panel. And that was a very interesting discussion. And thank you ever so much. So I hope you've enjoyed the session that we've run with you. Once again, thank you to our sponsors, DigiExam, IronTech and TestReach, who've enabled us to run this and promoted it with us. So thank you very much for that as well. Some interesting themes, I think, emerging. I was struck by the fact that in the first session, it was a customer-led exercise from two of the speakers, not just getting on the bandwagon, but something that customers needed. Another theme emerging there, transparency in what we're doing. And I think to build confidence in the sector, that's what we need as well. In practical terms, there was mention of a seamless experience for candidates, moving from one part of the assessment through the other and helping them through that, so that the technology itself doesn't become a barrier to what they're doing. And I think, as we saw in that last session, the focus on the personal, which in the medical context clearly is going to be really important. So thank you very much for your participation. If you want to get in touch with us, then here are the details of those of us from the eAA who've been involved, Pat, Paul, Romana and myself. You can email us or get us through LinkedIn, and we'd be very happy to carry on the conversation with you. And then finally, if you want to participate with us, you can join our community. Don't forget the conference, 6th and 7th of June. Become a member of the association. It's free. If you want to have a conversation about sponsorship, we'll happily do that. You can subscribe to our podcast and YouTube channels. Join the community on LinkedIn and follow us on Twitter. So once again, thank you ever so much. Hope you've had a good afternoon. I certainly have.